My daughter-in-law told me my workshop would make the perfect wedding venue for her sister, and that I'd be covering the cost since, in her words, you never contribute to anything. I set down my coffee cup and said, "Fine. You plan it, you pay for it, you host it." Her smile lasted about 4 seconds. She had no idea that by the time her sister walked down that aisle, I would already be living somewhere else, and the venue she was counting on would no longer exist. Welcome, and thank you for spending this time with me. If you're watching from your own kitchen table right now, tell me what state you're writing from. I read every single comment. A quick note before we start. Some details in this story have been adjusted to protect the people involved, but the truth underneath it is real, and I suspect a lot of you are going to recognize it. The morning this all started the way most mornings did that spring, with the smell of sawdust still hanging in the air from the night before, and the sound of my old dog Duke scratching at the back door of the workshop, wanting to be let in so he could sleep on the cool concrete floor while I worked. My name is Robert Callahan. Everyone who's known me more than 5 minutes calls me Bob. I'm 64 years old, and for the better part of 4 decades I built furniture for a living: cabinets, dining tables, rocking chairs, the kind of thing people used to pass down instead of throw away. I ran a small shop out of a converted barn on 11 acres outside Asheville, North Carolina, land my father bought in 1961 for less money than a used car costs today. My wife Diane and I built the house on that land ourselves, plank by plank, the same way I built everything else in my life: slow and stubborn and exact. She used to joke that I measured twice, cut once, and complained a third time just for good measure. Diane passed 4 years ago this coming October. Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed too late to do much about it. I still keep her reading glasses on the nightstand because I can't make myself put them in a drawer. I still make 2 cups of coffee some mornings before I remember. I sat with all of that quiet most days. The workshop kept me busy, kept my hands occupied so my mind didn't wander somewhere I didn't want it to go. That particular morning I was out there sanding down a walnut headboard for a customer in Charlotte when I heard the gate creak and boots on the gravel path, a sound I'd know anywhere after 31 years. Walter Finch has been my closest friend since we worked the same construction crew back in the early 90s. He's 71 now, moves a little slower than he used to, but he still shows up at my gate 2 or 3 mornings a week with 2 coffees from the gas station on Route 9, the one with the biscuits that are better than they have any right to be. He handed one through the workshop door without a word, same as always. "You look like you slept in that chair again," he said, settling onto the old stool by my workbench. "Didn't sleep much at all," I told him. "That why the sander's been going since 6? Something like that." He looked around the shop, at the half-finished headboard, at the shelves of hand tools I'd collected over 40 years, most of them older than my son. "How's the back holding up, working these long days?" "Manageable," I said. I said. "Everything's manageable if you set the bar low enough." Walter grinned at that, the way he always does when I say something he considers classic Bob. We drank our coffee and watched Duke chase a squirrel he had no real intention of catching, more out of principle than hunger. The morning was warm for April, that particular Blue Ridge warmth that comes in fast and doesn't ask permission. "You hear from Marcus lately?" Walter asked, not looking at me directly, which is how I knew the question had been sitting in him for a while. My son's name landed in that quiet workshop heavier than 4 syllables should. "Here and there," I said. "Heavy," Walter didn't press. 31 years of friendship teaches a man when to let a silence do its own work. 3 weeks after that, on a Saturday evening in late April, headlights I didn't recognize swept across my driveway and changed the shape of my life for the better part of a year. Marcus is 36. He's got my build, broad through the shoulders, and his mother's stubborn chin. Standing beside him at the bottom of my porch steps was his wife, Ashley. She works in what she calls brand partnerships, which, as far as I've ever been able to tell, means she takes photographs of expensive things and convinces other people to buy them. "Dad," Marcus said, his voice tight in a way I recognized from when he was 17 and had wrecked the truck. "We need to ask you something big, and I need you to hear all of it before you say anything." I brought them inside. We sat at my kitchen table, the one Diane and I built the same summer we finished the house. Marcus explained it the way a man explains something he's rehearsed. The apartment complex in Charlotte had been sold to a new management company. The rent had jumped 40% overnight. They'd been saving for a house of their own but couldn't get there fast enough at the new rate. They needed somewhere to land, just for a while, just to get their footing back. How long is a while? I asked. 8 months, Marcus said. October. We'll be out by October. I give you my word. Something in my chest wanted so badly to believe him that it ached. I looked at his hands on my table, the same hands I'd taught to swing a hammer when he was 9 years old. October 1st, I said. That's the date. Not looking by then. Moved out by then. You, 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 you. Absolutely, Marcus said, and his shoulders dropped 2 inches, the tension leaving him all at once. Dad, thank you. We won't even feel like we're here. You'll barely know it. Ashley reached across and squeezed my hand, her grip warm and rehearsed. We're going to be so respectful of your space, Bob. I promise you that. I've built enough houses to know that people who need to promise something in advance are usually the ones you should watch closest. But I told myself I was being unfair to a woman I barely knew, and I let it go. What came through my door over the next 2 hours was considerably more than a one-bedroom apartment's worth of belongings. Garment racks, studio lighting equipment in padded cases, a backdrop stand, boxes marked fragile prop decor stacked 4 high in my hallway. I stood aside and let it come in, and told myself 8 months was nothing. 8 months was a season. 8 months would pass the way every other season had. The first 6 weeks were what I'd call tolerable if you're willing to grade on a generous curve. Marcus fixed a loose hinge on my porch swing without being asked, and for an evening, I let myself believe this might actually be fine. We sat out there and talked about the Panthers game like we used to when he still lived under my roof as a boy, and the house felt, briefly, like it used to feel. Then, June arrived, and took that feeling with it. It started with my workshop. Ashley had asked, early on, if she could use just a corner of it for what she called content, and I'd said fine, thinking she meant a folding table and a laptop. By the second week of June, the corner had become half the shop. Ring lights aimed at my workbench, a rolling rack of clothing blocking the door to my tool cabinet, my grandfather's hand planes, the ones that had hung on that wall since before I was born, moved to a shelf in the back because they were, in her words, not on brand. Ashley, I said, the morning I found them stacked in a cardboard box. These belonged to my grandfather. She looked up from her phone with an expression that was pleasant but faintly confused, the way you'd look at someone who'd wandered into the wrong conversation. Oh, I just needed the wall space for the pegboard shot. It photographs so much better empty. You don't mind, do you, Bob? She said it so warmly that objecting would have felt like kicking something small and harmless. I didn't say anything. I moved the planes to my bedroom closet that night, up on the shelf above my flannel shirts, where nobody would reach for them without asking me first. By July, my workshop wasn't mine during daylight hours anymore. It was a set. Marcus, for his part, had started parking his SUV directly in front of my shop doors, which meant I couldn't back my truck out without asking him to move first. He never moved it in fewer than 3 requests. The evening that hit hardest happened on a Wednesday in late July. I came out to the shop to find my good chisels, the set Diane bought me for our 20th anniversary, being used to pry open a shipping crate for props. The edges, the ones I'd honed to a mirror finish for 30 years, were chipped in 2 places. Ashley, I said, and my voice came out lower than I meant it to. Those were a gift from my wife. She looked at the chisel in her hand like she was seeing it for the first time. Oh, I didn't realize. I'm sorry, Bob. She set it down on the workbench and went back to unpacking the crate. I picked up the chisel, ran my thumb along the chipped edge, and carried the whole set inside. I put them in the same closet as the planes. Walter found me on the back porch that Saturday, deadheading Diane's rose bushes, which is what I do with my hands when my mind needs somewhere else to go. You eat dinner alone again last night? He asked. How would you know that? Because I can see your kitchen light from my truck when I drive past, Bob, and I saw you standing there with a bowl of soup while there was a whole photo shoot going on in your workshop through the window. He paused. In your own building. It's temporary, I said. You keep saying that word. Walter's voice went flat and serious. I keep waiting for it to start meaning something again. October 1st came and went the way deadlines do when nobody on the other end intends to keep them. No conversation, no acknowledgement, just a fresh excuse sitting on the counter like it had always been there. I was at the kitchen table with my coffee when Marcus came down, already dressed for work. It's October, I said. He stopped with his hand on the door. I know, Dad. The market's brutal right now. We've been looking. I swear to you. Dad, everything in our range needs $40,000 of work we don't have. I understand the market's difficult, I said. That's not what I asked. A few more months, he said. That's all we need. That same week, I opened my bank statement the way I do on the first Monday of every month, and the number on the screen stopped my hand, halfway to my coffee cup. $19,000 gone from the account Diane and I had built for 30 years, the one I called my "someday I can't lift a board anymore" fund, withdrawn in a single transfer, 5 weeks earlier. I sat there and read it 3 times, waiting for it to be a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. And 3 days after that withdrawal cleared, a brand new pickup truck, the kind with all the chrome trim, appeared in my driveway where my own truck used to sit before Marcus's SUV took over the space. I called Walter. He was at my back gate in 10 minutes. $19,000, he said, reading the screen, his jaw tight. And the truck showed up 3 days later. That's what I'm looking at, I said. You gave him access to this account? Years ago. For emergencies. I pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of my nose. I never imagined I needed to define what counts as one. Walter sat with me for 2 hours that afternoon and didn't tell me what to do. Just let me work through it the way a good friend lets you find your own footing. When he stood to leave, he put his hand on my shoulder. You know where I am, he said. That was all. It was enough. I called Marcus down to the kitchen that evening. I slid the printed statement across the table and didn't say a word, just watched his face find the number. Dad, it was going to be a loan, he said, his voice cracking. I was going to pay it back before you even noticed. The dealership had a deal that was only good that week, and You took $19,000 from my retirement without asking me, I said, without telling me, without one word of explanation. I know how it looks. Do you? He looked down at his hands, and then he said the thing I will carry with me for the rest of my life, not because of the cruelty in it, but because of how easily it came out, like he'd already said it to himself 100 times. Dad, come on. It's not like this land isn't going to be mine someday anyway. The kitchen went completely still. I felt that sentence the way you feel a beam give way somewhere behind a wall, a deep structural failure you can't see but can absolutely feel. My chest went hollow. My eyes burned with something that wasn't anger, not exactly. It was grief for the son I thought I'd raised. Grief for 31 years I'd spent thinking I was building something for both of us, instead of something he was simply waiting to inherit. Go. On. Up. To bed, I said quietly. I'm done talking tonight, he went. I stood at that table alone for a long time, in the same kitchen Diane and I had eaten 10,000 ordinary breakfasts in, and I folded that bank statement once and put it in my shirt pocket, right against my chest. November settled into the house the way cold air settles into an old building, present in everything, spoken about by no one. Marcus didn't bring up the truck. I didn't bring up the money. We moved around each other with the careful distance of 2 men who'd both said something they couldn't take back. Then, on a Tuesday in the middle of November, I came into the kitchen to find it covered in printout after printout, color swatches, a seating chart, a laminated card with a font sample on it. Ashley was on speakerphone with someone, talking with her hand moving through the air like she was conducting an orchestra. The barn workshop is the whole aesthetic, she was saying. Exposed beams, that reclaimed wood thing everyone's obsessed with right now. My sister's wedding needs to feel authentic, not some rented ballroom. This is perfect. I set my coffee down. Ashley, whose wedding are we discussing? She glanced up, held one finger toward me, the universal signal for wait your turn, and kept talking. When she finally ended the call, she looked at me with the bright, energized glow of a woman deep inside a plan she'd already decided was settled. Bob, I am so excited. My sister Chelsea is getting married in June, and your workshop is going to be the venue. We'll do the ceremony right outside by the tree line and the reception inside among the tools. It's going to look so authentic. About 90 guests. 90 people, I said. In my shop. Did you plan to ask me about this at any point? Her smile stayed in place, but something behind it recalculated. I didn't think it would be a problem. It's basically family space at this point. It is my workshop, I said. I build furniture in it for a living. You are staying in my home. I am room. Those are 2 very different arrangements, and I need you to understand the difference before this conversation goes any further. Marcus, she called toward the hallway, her voice sharpening. Can you come here? He appeared a moment later, already reading the room the way a man does when he's learned that tone means trouble. Dad, it's one wedding. One. Can we not turn this into a whole thing? She's invited 90 people to my place of business without asking me, I said. He spread his hands. People love that shop. You should be proud. People want to get married in it. Proud. Numb. I must. As if 40 years of my hands in that wood, as if the space where I'd built Diane's own kitchen table existed to be a backdrop for someone else's wedding photos. My jaw tightened until I felt it at the hinge. I picked up my coffee and walked out before I said something I'd regret. Walter found me that Saturday stacking firewood, which is what I do when raking or pruning isn't enough to burn off what's sitting in my chest. 90 people, I told him, in my shop, for a wedding I wasn't asked about. Walter made a low sound in his throat. You have a plan yet? I set down the log I was holding and looked at the barn, the roofline I'd reframed myself after a storm in '09, the doors I'd rehung twice to get the swing exactly right. Working on one, I said. I'd move quick, Walter said. Weddings don't plan themselves, and somebody's going to expect you to pay for a good chunk of it. The list arrived on a Monday morning in early December, 6 months before the wedding date, but apparently urgent all the same, dropped directly on top of my newspaper while I was doing the crossword. Rental linens by the dozen. A specific brand of string lighting, 400 feet of it. A tent company deposit. A caterer, requiring a non-refundable retainer within the week. At the bottom, in Ashley's handwriting, also need the old tools moved out completely for photos talk to Bob. I read every line, then set the paper down and looked up at her. I need the deposit sent by Friday, she said, eyes on her phone. The caterer's holding the date, but only if we confirm this week. You planned this wedding, I said, my voice even. You booked the venue, without permission. You handle the deposits. She looked up slowly. Excuse me? This is my workshop, I said. My tools, my building, my livelihood. You're asking me to empty it out and pay for the privilege. I'm declining both. Marcus came in 30 seconds later, read the room the way he always did now. Too late and too slow. Dad, come on. It's family. We all pitch in. It has never been about pitching in, I said quietly. Not once. I walked out to the shop, sat down on my workbench stool, and let my hands shake for a minute before I picked up the phone. In North Carolina, same as most states, a joint account holder, or in this case, a man who is the sole owner of an account with an authorized user attached, can remove that access at any time, effective immediately, no explanation required. I called the bank and deactivated the card I'd given Marcus 18 months earlier for household expenses, the one that had been quietly funding string lights and rental linens, and I couldn't begin to guess what else. The whole call took 4 minutes. That night I lay awake and thought about a phrase Diane used to say, "A house built without a foundation will fall on the people standing closest to it." I decided, somewhere around 2 in the morning, that I was done being the foundation for people who wouldn't even acknowledge I was holding them up. Before I tell you what happened in that shop on the day of the wedding, I need to know you're still with me. If you've ever built something with your hands and watched somebody try to take credit for it, type the word carpenter in the comments right now. I promise you, there are more of us out here than you'd think. A quick note before we go further: some parts of what's coming have been shaped for the telling, the way any story gets shaped in the retelling. If that's not what you're here for, no hard feelings at all. But if you're staying, I think you already know why. I spent the next several days doing what I do best, working quietly and telling no one my plans. I called my nephew, who runs a small equipment rental company 2 counties over, and made an arrangement of my own. I called my lawyer, a woman named Patricia Reyes, who'd handled my will after Diane passed, and asked her a very specific set of questions about property, liability, end quote, 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 and the terms under which a business owner can decline the use of his own premises. I learned things that Saturday afternoon that I should have looked into months earlier, and I regretted every week I hadn't. I did not confront anyone. I did not make a scene. I did not make a scene. I ate dinner at my normal time, said good morning in the hallway, held doors, and to every outward appearance remained exactly the man I'd always been. But underneath that, I was quietly moving my grandfather's planes, and my anniversary chisels, and every tool that mattered to me, into a rented storage unit in town. I photographed the workshop's insurance documents and business registration, which listed the building explicitly as commercial property, not part of the residence, a detail Ashley had apparently never bothered to check. And I began making calls to people I hadn't spoken to in years, old customers, a reporter from the local paper who'd once done a piece on my furniture, a woman from the county zoning office. 2 weeks before the wedding, I sat Marcus down at the kitchen table one final time. I need you to hear this clearly, I said. That building is a licensed commercial workshop. It is not zoned for events of that size. It is not insured for 90 guests, and I have not given written permission for its use, which is required under the terms of my own liability coverage. If this wedding proceeds there, I will not be responsible for what happens, and neither will my insurance. Marcus went pale. Dad, we've already told everyone. The invitations went out. Lesting, Chelsea's mother-in-law, is flying in from Ohio. That, I said, is not something I did to you. That is something you and Ashley did to yourselves. 6 months ago, when you booked a venue you didn't own. He didn't sleep much that week, from what I could tell through the walls. Neither did Ashley. I heard her on the phone at odd hours, her voice losing its polish a little more each night. 10 days before the wedding, I packed a bag. Not dramatically, the same methodical way I've always done everything. 3 days of clothes, my medications, the small framed photo of Diane I keep on my dresser. I left a note on the kitchen table. 7 words. The workshop is yours to solve. Axe. I drove out to Walter's place, where he'd had the guest room ready for a week already, because he knows me well enough to have seen this coming before I said a word about it. My phone started buzzing the next morning. Marcus first, then Ashley, then, by the 3rd day, someone I didn't recognize, Ashley's mother, apparently, wanting to know why the venue coordinator had called to confirm access and been told the building was closed to non-business use, per county code, effective immediately. Walter's daughter Renee lives 2 roads over from my property, and she was the one who told her father what she saw on the day itself, because she drove past on her way to the farmer's market and ended up parked at the end of my drive for the better part of 20 minutes. You want the whole thing or the short version? Walter asked me on his porch that afternoon. Whole thing, I said. I've got nowhere else to be. Cars had started arriving around 11, nice ones, people dressed for a wedding, kids in little suits. Ashley was standing at the shop doors in a white dress that wasn't the bride's, apparently determined to play hostess anyway, waving people toward a building that, according to Renee, had a printed notice taped to the door from the county. Not permitted for public assembly commercial workshop. Someone from the catering company was already there, unloading, then reloading, because apparently no one had confirmed final access with the property owner, meaning me, and I had confirmed nothing at all. A man in a gray suit, Renee said. Big fellow, looked important, walked up, and read that notice out loud to the whole group. Walter told me. Then he turned around and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, whose name is actually on this building? My chest tightened. That'll be Chelsea's father-in-law, I said. He works in commercial real estate. He'd know exactly what that notice meant. Ashley tried to explain it. Walter continued. Renee said she heard 3 different stories in about 5 minutes. First, it was a permit mix-up. Then it was a miscommunication with the caterer. Then she said your name. She blamed me. She said you were supposed to handle the permits. Walter's voice dropped. That's when Ashley's mother stepped in. Apparently. Small woman, according to Renee, very calm. She said, Ashley, whose building is this? And Ashley didn't answer. The wedding, from what Renee described, moved to a public park, with about 1/3 of the guest list following, and the rest simply going home. No barn, no string lights, no reclaimed wood aesthetic, just a hastily rearranged ceremony under a picnic shelter while the caterer stood in a parking lot deciding whether to charge a cancellation fee. That evening, my phone rang. I let it ring twice before I answered. Hello, I said, level and unhurried. Ashley's voice came through, and it wasn't the bright, rehearsed voice I'd heard for 8 months. It was stripped down to something raw. You did this on purpose. You let us plan an entire wedding around that building, And then you pulled the rug out in front of everyone I know. Did I book that venue? I asked. Did I send the invitations? Did I tell 90 people to show up at a building I never gave you permission to use? Her breath came ragged through the phone. We live there. It's basically ours. You have lived in my home for 8 months. Rent-free, I said. Used my workshop as a photo studio. Damaged tools that belonged to my grandfather and my late wife. And last month, you booked a commercial event on my property, without asking me a single question. I closed a door that was never open to begin with. That is the smallest possible response to everything that came before it. From behind her, I could hear voices. People still gathered somewhere, listening to what they weren't supposed to hear. Then Marcus's voice broke in. Dad, family shows up for each other. You taught me that. I did, I said, and the weight of every year I'd believed it sat behind those words. I showed up when you needed help at 22. I showed up when your first job fell through. I showed up in April when you needed 8 months that turned into over a year. Today I am at a friend's house drinking coffee on his porch. Those are not the same thing. Ashley made a sound that wasn't quite words, and then, quieter, broken all the way open, she said, You ruined my sister's wedding. Your sister's wedding, I said, was ruined the moment you built it on a foundation that was never yours to build on. Congratulations to Chelsea. I hope the rest of the day went better. I ended the call. Walter came out with 2 glasses of something amber and handed me one without a word. Done? He asked. Done, I said. He raised his glass. To Diane, who'd have told you to do this a year sooner? My throat tightened hard enough that I had to wait a moment before I could drink to that. Over the following days, the messages changed in tone. Marcus's texts turned from angry to hollow. Chelsea's marriage is off to a rough start. Everyone's furious with Ashley, not with you. Then, 4 days after the wedding, a longer message arrived from a number I didn't know. It was Ashley's father, a man I'd met exactly twice. Mr. Callahan, I want to apologize. I didn't fully understand the situation until my daughter couldn't answer a very simple question in front of 90 people. What happened to you in your own home was not right, and I should have asked more questions before any of us assumed anything about that building. I'm sorry. I read it 3 times. 8 sentences from a man I'd never expected accountability from. 2 weeks later, Marcus showed up at Walter's gate on a Saturday morning, alone, in old clothes, no truck this time, having sold it, he told me, to help pay back what he could. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps the way he had the night this all began, except this time his shoulders weren't squared with rehearsed confidence. They were just tired. I'm not asking for the workshop back, he said. I'm not even asking you to forgive me today. I just needed to say it to your face. I took things from you I had no right to take, and I let Ashley talk me into believing your whole life was just something we were entitled to inherit early. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Dad. I looked at my son for a long moment, at the same jaw I'd shaved for the first time when he was 14, standing there having finally run out of excuses. Where are you? And Ashley now? I asked. Small place in town, he said. 2 rooms. Our names on the lease this time. Nobody else's. He paused. It's not much, but it's honest. I put my hand on his shoulder, one firm press, the way I had, since he was small enough to need it. That's a start, I said. A real one. I moved back into my house in February, once the utilities and the paperwork were settled, and Marcus and Ashley's things were fully out. The workshop was quiet again, my grandfather's planes back on their wall, the anniversary chisels back in their drawer where they belonged. I decorated the shop that spring the way I always had, and the first piece I built in it after everyone left was a small cedar chest, the kind Diane used to keep her sewing things in. I didn't sell that one. I kept it. People sometimes ask if I regret how it ended, whether I wish I'd done something gentler. My answer is always the same. I only regret waiting, as long as I did. I spent the better part of a year mistaking patience for love, and they are not the same thing. Patience without a limit stops being a virtue and starts being permission. Permission for the people who ought to respect you most to keep taking until you have nothing left to give. If I could go back and talk to the man I was that April evening, the one who let a moving truck full of studio lighting come through his front door without a single condition attached, I'd tell him this. What you build with your own hands is worth defending, even from your own blood. Especially from your own blood. A man who gives away everything he's built eventually has nothing left to stand on, and a man with nothing to stand on can't help the people who actually need him. I'm not a bitter man. I'm a carpenter. I spent my whole working life building things meant to outlast me. But I've learned you sometimes have to clear a space before you can build anything solid in it. That's all I did that December. I cleared the ground. If this story found something true in you, if it reminded you of a door you've been holding open a little too long, tell me about it in the comments. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this one, stay close, because there's always another to tell. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It means more than you'd probably guess. A note before you go. Some elements in stories like this one are shaped for the telling, built around real experiences but not a literal record of events. If that's not what you came here for, that's completely all right. But if you're still here with me, I think you already understand why.